Alright, in this video I'm going to be going over bone constraints and then possibly drivers. But that may be split into two videos as drivers can be a pain. They're very, very confusing for people that aren't used to similar systems. Just because you're doing a lot of technical actions and it's not exactly clear in a conceptual way what you're doing. I may also throw in a video about the differences between world, local, local with parents, and pose space. And then scene organization. Goodness me. Lot to go over. I'm going to select all of these armature objects, and I'm going to press Alt-R to reset the rotation within the armature. Alright. So, constraints is probably where I should start off. With one of these bones in pose mode, you can then go over to the right side, and this does not appear within edit mode. Over to the right side, and you can see bone constraint properties. In this menu, if I go in, I can click add bone constraint, and you can see that we get a whole list of bone constraints. If you want to add them instead, I believe it's Control-Shift-C, which you can pick from. And then you have to go over here and fiddle around with all the options, of course. So I'm not sure why I would use this apart from super simple things. Anyway, you can sort of guesstimate what they do based on their names. Copy location, copy rotation, copy scale, and copy transforms should be pretty obvious. Limit distance, that limits a distance in a sphere around a object or target object. Limit rotation, or limit location, so that limits the location based on either the target or the world. Limit rotation and limit scale do the same exact thing. Maintain volume. This is good for squash and stretch meshes. We won't worry about that for our production, but I suppose I should give a demonstration of that in a moment. We've got transformation. This is the big beefy one, which most people use and is pretty darn useful. And transformation cache. Don't worry about this one. It has to do with a certain couple of things in drivers. I believe I've rarely used this. I've rarely had a need to look into it to use it. Anyway, with tracking, you have clamp 2, damped track, inverse kinematics, locked track, spline, inverse kinematics, stretch 2, and track 2. The primary ones that you have to worry about with mechanical motion are a dampened track and locked track, mostly locked track. And then spline IK is being able to throw out a spine and have bones follow along that spline, or like a curve. Relationship, most of these don't matter. Well, I don't want to say most, but you can ignore action. That's a fucking hell of a thing to get into. I apologize. I just can sympathize with everybody starting out new with the NLA editor. It's just disgusting. You have armature, especially, in 2.79 previous it was even worse, but with 2.8 it's gotten better, but it's still lacking in functionality and user case. Anyway, you've got child of, floor, follow path, pivot, and shrink wrap. Pivot and shrink wrap are probably the ones I find to be most useful within this area, only seconded by floor and then child of and then floor. We also have motion tracking, camera solver, follow track, and object solver. You don't have to worry about these ones for the moment. Anyway, so what I want is I want transformation. This is one heck of a menu. And let me go in and let me remove that target of the empty. For some reason, at times it'll automatically create a target of an empty. I'm just going to go in here. I'm going to go into edit mode, and it's completely fine to delete this empty. Going into pose mode, back with this object constraints. This is one heck of a beast to get into. Essentially what's happening is that you have a target up here. Extrapolate will almost always be turned on. Then you have source information, and you've got X, Y, and Z, rotation, location, or scale, I believe. No, you can't have both. I apologize. Then you've got source to destination. So currently it's location of the source of 0, 0 is being sent to the location minimum and maximum of the source. And it's going from X to X. So if I wanted to, I could map the Y to the X by simply pressing Y from the source to the destination of X. And then we've got, of course, X, Y, and Z, and all of that. Then we have destination. So this is the end result. It'll either be location, rotation, or scale. And then you can have multiple different rotations on this, or minimum and maximum. Then you have the mix of whether or not it's going to add or replace, and whether or not the spaces that it's going to be referencing the information from will be local or world space. Or if you have a bone selected, you'll also get two other options, local with parent and pose space. They all do somewhat slightly different things, and I'll have a video covering them specifically. Well, no, this video will include information about what each one of them does, as it is the most pertinent information. So anyway, I'm going to go on here, and I'm going to click and choose the armature. This armature should have been renamed, but oh well. And I'm going to go from bone, and I'm going to choose a bone that'll be the source of the information. For this, we want the control.bend. So this bone out here is considered the source for this transform constraint. So under source, I want to have the location of this object within a certain direction affect the rotation of the bone. So within the source, I'm going to, let's see. Here's where we have to start thinking about local versus parent versus local with parent versus pose and world space. I can't speak at the moment. So you can see with this object that currently Z is vertical within its local space because it was rotated 90 degrees. So I'm going to go in here, and let's say that we want the Z or vertical direction within the local space to translate the rotation over here of these bones. So I'm going to change this minimum to -1 and +1. These are in scene units. So if I move this up by -1, or sorry, move this down by 1, or move it up by 1, it'll affect to the minimum and maximum of these. These are not soft caps. These will be bypassed so that if I move this more than 1 foot up or 1 foot down, then it'll keep using it as a factor of the minimum and maximum, essentially. So now I want to have, instead of location, I want to set this to rotation. We're not going to worry about the XY Euler, or XYZ or Euler rotation order, because that we just don't care about it at the moment. And I want to rotate this within this Z, well, let's just say this X direction for the moment. So what's kind of confusing at the moment is that each one of, well, no, I'm sorry, let's map it to the Z. Because the Z is different in local with parent space as compared to world space. The difference in between local space and world space is that local space is based off of the origin of the object. So that's this little yellow dot right here. If I go into object mode and move this over, none of these objects have moved within local space. However, they have moved within world space. If I go in here and I go into pose mode, and I was to rotate one of these objects are being rotated in, they're being accounted for in local space. However, they are being rotated in local with parent space, and you can refer to them within both. It should also be noted that local space, which is based off of the object, when originally created, has the world space constraints. So all of these are local with parent space information, basically. Anyway, so I'm sorry, I wanted to kind of try to clarify that a little bit. So with rotation, I want to map it onto the Z direction of this bend. So Z, I'm going to say, I'm going to set it to negative 50 degrees, and the minimum and maximum of positive 50 degrees. And we can see something really weird happen. It twisted, and that's because right now it's based off of the world space of this object. So this object is currently changing within world space. And over here, it's set so that it looks at the world space of this object, or its absolute position is a better way of saying it. If we wanted to change that so that it was in pose space, this pose space is the translation that is different from edit mode to this mode to pose mode, so that's the difference in between those two. It seems that it is not working completely. I must be incorrect. I'm going to assume local with parent, and that seems to be working correctly. And so now the local z-axis and the world z-axis in this case, because the local z and the world z align in this case, are along the same axis, and you can see that moving it up a foot and moving it down a foot changes the rotation by 50 degrees within the target axis of z. However, this z-axis is currently in world space rather than local space, or rather local with parent space. So if I change this to local with parent space, now it'll rotate along the local with parent space, which is displayed by these icons. So moving these up and moving these down now change it within its local space. You can see how this might be very useful for affecting lots of different levels of bones. But I'm going to do one more thing, and I'm going to copy these constraints up the chain. So now if I have an add-on enabled that allows me to do this. Normally you would be able to press Control L, however that does not work within 2.8 for whatever reason. They have changed shortcuts. Within bone mode I thought it was Control L, but it's been quite a while. So I must apologize if that is misinformation. If you go up to Edit and then go down to Preferences, I'm just going to go to Add-ons and then search up Copy. With this, you can see Copy Render Settings. We don't have to worry about that one. And Copy Attributes menu. If you enable that by pressing the checker mark icon, you can now go into the bottom left and save preferences. I do that just because I've gotten in the habit of doing it, and sometimes I'm messing around with stuff and I want to keep things not in between sessions, but in between sessions where I don't save in between. Because I believe when you save in Blender, it saves the preferences. However, if you don't save the scene, it won't save the preferences. So you can go down there and manually save it. Anyway, exiting out of that, I can now select all of these and select the one that I want to copy the constraints from last. Press Control C, and you can see that you get a copy of attributes. For this, I'm going to copy bone constraints. And you can see that all of them turn green, which shows that they're all being affected by the same constraint. So now, going in here, I can raise and I can lower this, and it affects and bends all of these different objects. There's a slight thing here where it's jumping up and down, and what's causing that, I believe, no, that shouldn't be happening. I'm not entirely certain what is causing this. Local with parent, local with parent. It is most likely that I've set it to local with parent instead of post space. I must apologize. I will try to get. Oh, I'm really stupid. What you have to make sure that you don't have is snap on while you're translating. So now you can see it's smooth. What was happening was that with snap on, I was trying to snap this to the vertices in the object. So if you can see here, when I stop, when it's weird like that, it's trying to snap this object to that vertex. So keep that off. And now you can see it moves perfectly fine. Alright, within the next video, I'm going to go over drivers and then variables as it relates to rigging.